I think that it's really okay to go through transition periods. It doesn't have to be front and center on your resume, but
Yes,
also think that it should never be something that you're ashamed of. And it should be
absolutely.
something that you look at as a failure. A lot of people get very defeated by the fact that they sometimes have to take pauses and breaks in their career. And I just think that it's okay. Like, it's fine to put something on pause, in life. There's seasons, things regrow, things come back stronger. And I think that you need to go through all of those seasons of yourself in order to really know what your next steps are going to be.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Second Chapter Careers. Today is a very, very special episode for me because I have with me Lani Bell. We went to high school together, but we haven't been in touch probably in, I don't want to say how many years, so I don't
Okay, how many
age us.
years?
Over 20, let's say. Tw- It's crazy. But we have not been in touch and we've barely spoken since then. And somehow we both ended up in Israel and found each other. And now I'm just really, really excited to share Lani's second chapter story, which is so much more than just a career journey. So thank you, Lani, so much for being here and tell us about yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Lani. I live in Renana for the last 6 years. I made Aliyah 6 years ago, right in COVID. It's been the best of times. It's been the worst of times. No,
Just starting there, that's pretty brave.
but you know what? I think like people ask that question a lot, but anyone that's made Aliyah already knows that like the train had very much left the station at that point. You don't get all your documents and your apostilles and your this and your lift, and you're basically halfway there. There's no like undoing it at that point. You've invested too much. So
Right.
yeah, and listen, I think that like most things in life, there were definite negatives, primarily like my children getting an education, but there were also a lot of positives in a weird way. We really bonded tremendously with other Olim. We really banded together in terms of those kinds of things. There was a lot like less pressure on everyone, to figure it out right away. So in that way, my
That's a good perspective. I never thought of it like that, but that is a really good perspective.
Yeah, it was a really interesting like way to start. It was just like it was almost like a time machine. Like we had really gone back in time to a simpler life because there was nowhere to
Oh,
go. And the only people, I don't know if like everyone remembers, but you were only allowed, it's the most Israeli thing, but you were only allowed to like be outside in any certain distance from your house if you were exercising. So I
right.
just lived in leggings and like
Yes.
I walked everywhere.
Mm,
And so that was, my other friends would call and say, what are we doing today? You want to take a walk? You want to take a walk to get a
yep.
sit? You want to sit on a park bench? Like this is all we
Yeah.
did. So,
Okay.
in that way it was nice.
Okay. Well, I'm glad it worked out. And 6 years later, here you are.
Here I
So,
am 6 years later.
okay. So let's start by you telling us about your career journey. We'll start with that and then we'll branch out.
Okay, so my career journey. After we graduated high school, I went to college thinking that I was going to go into journalism.
Me
I
too.
really?
Me
I
too.
didn't know that.
Yeah, but I took a journalism class and every single paper I got a B. Like it didn't matter if I worked on it for 10 minutes or 10 weeks, I got a B. It's like he saw my name and said, "Oh, Sari, that's a B." And I said, "I can't handle like a major that's so subjective. I could be a good writer, but I can't handle getting bad grades because someone doesn't like the way
So
I look or whatever."
it's so funny that you said that because I was an English literature major and I coasted. And I was a journalism minor, and my professors used to say to me all the time, like at one point they just were honest and they just said like, you're a creative writer. Like you're not a journalist. I realized that was really true. And in the like 11th hour, I switched and got my my minor in secondary education. So I actually have a teaching degree in English. I did my student
Okay.
teaching. I just, and I realized, yes, I was just much more of a creative writer. And I guess for whatever reason, I thought that the only real job I could do with that was to go into teaching. And I didn't really want to go into teaching after my student teaching. I loved it, but I felt like it wasn't going to be like the thing for me. And it didn't seem like the career path that I wanted to choose. And I have two older brothers and one younger brother, but my two older brothers at the time were either already in or had graduated from law school. And I was like, okay, I'm a smart girl. That seems like a real degree. And I think there was something in me that always yearned for a little more creativity and a little more passion. But for some reason, I always thought of it as a hobby. I always thought I need a degree to hang on the wall. And I got one. I went to law school and I really loved it. I loved school. And I was part of the Labor Law Journal. And I published an article in the Labor Law Journal that actually is like still cited today with Tammy Zimmelman, who's a great above us. She was also in school
Cool.
with me at the time. We
Yeah,
ended up in the same class. And
that's
we
crazy.
co-authored this article. And again, it was just like another way for me to channel my creativity and write on a topic that was really not out there, that was really not trending at the time. And I graduated and I took a position, work a transactional attorney. Most of what I was doing was real estate closings and hard money lending and business deals. And it was a time in my life where I really started to understand that what you do for a living really affects your whole inner self and your view of yourself. And when you're really in the wrong role, I think it's really easy to blame yourself. I was good at my job. I just didn't like doing it and I didn't feel good doing it. And there's a certain amount of I want to say buyer's remorse
Mhm.
when you realize you've invested a lot of time in a
And
degree
money?
or money. Thank God I had a very hefty scholarship, because if I hadn't, like, I think I really probably, we might be still talking about my law career still
Oh,
now.
no.
While I was doing that, much of what I was doing, like I said, was real estate and leasing. And I was working with a company doing their leasing. And my client asked me, hey, do you know how to do trademarks? I was like, yes. The answer was no. I was like, yeah, I'm sure. Let me talk to the boss. I'm sure we can add that. And I spent like a week learning and teaching myself. And it was really interesting because there's like a whole registry with the government. And to me, it was like another real creative outlet that I could sort of learn and practice. So even within my law degree and my law career, I was really striving. And then I ended up having my first child and I went out on maternity leave. And I remember my boss came to visit me, and we're still friendly to this day. And he came and he visited me and he brought me a gift and he said, it was really great working with you. And I said, is my job not available anymore when I come back? And he said, oh, no, your job is available whenever you want to come back, but you're not coming back. And I said, no, like, it's not, I'm not that, like, I'm not going to just, stay at home. Like, I'll be home for a
Right.
while and then I'll come back. And he was like, no, not because of that. He's like, because you really don't like practicing law. It's really just not the career path.
Well,
It was really
wait, hold
eye-opening
on.
to hear from someone else.
Yeah, I wanna stop you there for a second and just ask you 2 questions about what you just said. The first is, since you loved law school so much, did you expect to love practicing law, but then it was not what you expected? Or you kind
I
of
I
doing a
with
different type of law, things might be different?
I think anyone that's been to law school already understands that law school and law practice, it's like two completely unrelated. How law school is your prep for becoming a lawyer it's really, yes, there's a tremendous amount of learning and all of those things. Again, I think probably I might have gone into the wrong field of law. Maybe if I had like gone into something a little bit different, I might have had a different experience. But definitely I knew that it was not only the field of practice, it was definitely the career choice.
I think
I just had my second kid, and I was doing a lease for a company that was like, at the time, my husband and other people, and I was sitting at this lease signing for the office, and an advertisement was put in front of me by a sales rep, and like they were waiting for the office for the conference room after me, and they said like, what do you think of this? And I think it was a lot of like new mom fatigue and probably hormones, but I was not nice about the ad because it really was bad. And I
okay.
said, I think it sucks. And they were like really surprised, and they said, "Well, what can we do to fix it?" And I said, "You could throw it in the garbage and start again." It's what I really think you could do. And then I said, "Well, what direction would you go?" I said, "Give me 24 hours." And the next day I came back with a full, I remember being up all night, and I just was like, the creative energy was so intense, and I came up with an entire rebranding and an ad campaign and a slogan and like the whole nine. And it was really, really good. And they ended up running the campaign, and it was really successful. And I ended up becoming the VP of marketing for the company for about 9 years. And
Wow.
that was my transition. So I like to joke that I didn't get into marketing by accident. I got into marketing by insult.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I think in your career path, I think like real brutal honesty. I think in those moments, I think you become, it's honesty not only with other people, but honesty with yourself. And so I really seized the moment, and I really ran with it. And I learned on the job. I was really not afraid to fail. I think that's a big thing for people when they're changing
Huge.
careers. I think there's a lot of overthinking involved, and especially as women and mothers, people like, if you have a family to support, I think people stay stuck very often, just because there's a level of imposter syndrome that we have, and I don't know how, so how could I possibly do? And so yeah, opportunity really, I think I just like manifested a career change because I really knew that I needed to go back to something, and I really did not want to go back to law. And so the paradox of like being in that moment, because I was bringing a lease that I had drawn up and then leaving with a totally different career path was not lost on me. So it was, and I stayed for 9 years in that
Wow.
role, and it was a great time for me.
The question is really, I think, this is maybe going to sound snotty. I'm not sure. I hope it's okay for people listening. But was it hard for your ego to go from saying, I'm a lawyer, which is like the Jewish mother's dream, to being like, I'm in marketing?
Well,
And I
I think
say that because I come from the world of marketing, but I think my parents still to this day wish they could say their daughter's a lawyer and I'm in marketing. So
right.
I'm just
It's
curious how
funny.
how
Well,
that
now I'm in
for your
marketing, and my mom can still say that I'm a lawyer. It's interesting. I mentioned earlier that I went to law school because I thought that I needed a degree to hang on the wall. And my law degree is still in a manila envelope that it was sent to me by UPS. And I never framed it, and I never hung it on the wall. And I think that there's like a real power in that. It never felt like me. I never connected with it. It was something that I did. It was never someone that I was. And I think the real Jewish mother's dream is like the marrying a lawyer. But I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think there's a lot. of weight that we put on degrees, and I think it's something that I learned here being in Israel that a lot of Olim really struggle with. Now, I made my career change before I came to Israel, but when you come to Israel and you go into high tech and you realize that so many people don't have degrees, so many people, and there's plenty of people that do, and and they're maybe better off in some ways, but the judgment on your talent, on your value, on your ability is not hedged on the university that you went to, the degree that you hold. It's that I feel like here comes very much secondary to your energy and your personality and your talent and your experience and your enthusiasm and all of the other more personal qualities that only you can bring to any career. And then it's like, oh, that's nice. You have a degree. Tell me about that.
I
And
totally agree.
what's really interesting to me is that in my current role, which we'll talk about, my law degree comes entirely secondary to the fact that I was an English literature major. That was so much more impressive to them that like, oh, you must really know how to write, you know? It was the law degree, like I could have left off the resume. So
So I totally agree with you. I
I
didn't go to like the Ivies, even though my parents only wanted that for me because I wanted to have that college fun and not be a workaholic. But here, nobody even like cares where you went to college. I have neighbors who are PhDs you wouldn't even know when they're picking their kids up at Gone. Like
correct.
it's just a totally
Correct.
much more chill
I'll
type
tell
of
you this, I
environment.
had a neighbor that was taking out my trash during COVID, like when we literally couldn't leave the house because we were quarantined. And I asked her like weeks later after I'd met her, this lovely lady taking out my trash. And I was like, what do you actually do? Like besides take out the trash? She was like, I'm a doctor. I work for like a biotech company doing research and development. And I was like, oh, thank you for taking out my trash.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, people do amazing things here and like you just wouldn't know about their history. And I think
Correct.
that's a really, really important and valid point that
Yeah.
you bring up. But since you also mentioned the English Lit degree, maybe tell us what you do now.
Okay, so I was doing marketing, and then when I made Aliyah, I came to Israel. I took a bit of a break to acclimate myself and my kids, and then I opened up my own marketing and media company, and I was working independently here. I actually, when I had decided to start working, I was incredibly like blessed. I think that I want to say, part of it is luck, but a big part of it also, I think, when they say, necessity is the mother of all invention, I think also, necessity is the mother of all inspiration and momentum and passion and all of those things. And so at the time when I started my company, the writing was already on the walls that I was going to get divorced. And I think, and I'll say this, it's a little bit maybe off topic as far as second careers, but I think in general, as far as careers go, I think that something that's really important and hard earned lesson for me is that as much as I had my law degree still, I was not current on it. So I didn't feel it would have been a really hard climb back to start making any real kind of money, especially in Israel. I could have worked like for a US thing, but then to not be there and try to get trained and all this stuff, it was a much harder thing to do. And so I think that it's really, really important as women especially to stay current and to stay in touch with the skill set that you have.
I totally
Mm.
agree.
Because and it doesn't necessarily have to be divorce. Things change. People
Mhm.
unfortunately get ill, circumstances change, jobs get lost. Sometimes things fall in your lap, and I never really understood it. My mom worked her whole life, and She could have not. She definitely brought something to the table and all of this other stuff. And my parents, thank God, are very happily married still for many, many years. And I think it took me a little bit long to learn that. I, I see people talking about not wanting to work, wanting to raise their kids,
Mhm.
wanting to be stay-at-home moms. And I understand it. Like, I loved being at home with my kids. And I'll actually tell you, after my divorce, we'll talk about, like, I ended up doing things that allowed me to be, I'm the primary parent. I'm like literally 24/7. My kids are with me all the time. We'll leave it at that. My kids are with me, and I needed to be around. It was a big challenging few years, and I needed to be around as a mother present. But, I found ways to work and do different things. But I do think it's a really, really important thing. But I think the reason that a lot of women feel that they don't want to go back to work is often that you're really disconnected from what you're doing. So if what you're doing seems really unimportant in relation to raising your children, then of course, like, nobody wants to go back to that. So, I think it's something to sort of consider. Again, like, my entire career change happened after I had my kids. I
Right.
didn't have kids when I was a lawyer, and I wasn't a lawyer after I had kids. And that switch, I don't think would have happened if I didn't have that perspective shift. That if I'm going to do something with my time that's not raising my children, I want to do something with my time that's meaningful to me.
Right. I love that.
I live in a country that's very hard to navigate in every area. I came at a time during a pandemic. I stayed through a divorce. We've now both lived through multiple wars. I parent my kids 100% full time. I'm the breadwinner. I don't have family here, so I don't take away from, the stress that women have to sort of balance it all. I know it really, really well. But even with that being said, the surprise that I felt that I am somewhat less stressed now, being much more financially secure situation, being able to accomplish different things and still be a very present parent, maybe in certain areas more present because I know my time is more limited. I think it so strengthens you. So it's definitely something I think that people need to be aware of. Like, if you hate going to your job, you really need a new job. You really, really.
That is my mantra of life. But yes,
Yeah.
first of all, I just want to say again, now that everyone knows about how committed you are to your kids and how hard you're working and how much you do all day, again, just thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation because I really do recognize how hard it is and how valuable it is for
Yes.
you.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, after I will say that not everything that you do, you asked me before about, did it feel bad to go from being like a lawyer to being in marketing? And like, no, it didn't, but I definitely understand the question. But I've I think I've taken even deeper, sort of shifts. Like, I mentioned that, so I opened up my own company, and I worked with incredible, incredible people and some extremely large Israeli nonprofits, and doing their website and doing their branding, and I made incredible connections. But working at Smy is not always, it's not always an easy thing. And October 7th, like, nobody was investing in their business. Nobody was
Right.
rebranding. Like, nobody cared about marketing their, non, like, it was, I had any work that I was doing during that time was very much directly related to October 7th and Israeli causes and all of these other things, and you know, anti-Semitism campaigns and all of that kind of stuff. But it was not a sustainable kind of thing for me. And I wanted to get a paycheck one of the things that I had very much missed in my aliyah was that I came into a pandemic and my kids were not in school. So I didn't take Ulpan. So my Hebrew's terrible to this day. It's like the worst. And also, when you speak one language really well, I hope, and you take a lot of pride in the words that you write and the way that you express things,
Mhm.
it's extremely hard for me. And I'm not a person that's embarrassed, like basically of anything. But with this,
That's a
I
good
do.
skill.
There is such a disconnect for me with with like speaking a foreign language. It's not a skill that I have. It's not a skill that I was able to cultivate in a classroom setting, which is typically like where I would be able to cultivate that kind of skill. There are some people like just put them in the world and, in a month they'll be speaking Hebrew. That's
I'm
not me.
not that person.
I'm not that
Mhm.
person. I'm literally not that person, but I ended up taking a job working. My boyfriend has a bakery, and I ended up taking a job because it's literally walking distance to my house. And I ended up taking a job in the bakery. So you talk about going from like lawyer to marketing to barista. Okay. And I think at a certain point, like, yes, there's definitely, it's again, it started out as like, it was just like fun kind of, I have time during the day when my kids are now at school, or it's the only thing that's open during the war. And, I'm not a person that likes to waste my time, but I can tell you that when you're a motivated person and you are keeping your eyes and ears open for opportunities, it was an amazing experience for me. Besides the fact that I can now make an amazing afuch, like I was barista number one. You give me cortado, macchiato, I can do it all, which I think is just like a very cool skill to have. I used it really as an opportunity to improve. I won't say learn Hebrew, but I'll say improve my Hebrew.
Okay.
I was, it's still Renana, so it was like a 50%. It wasn't a full-time Hebrew learning program, but it was definitely a part-time one. And it was a great networking. I had clients. And again, I think this speaks to this idea of the cultural differences in Israel versus America or versus any other,
Mhm.
non-Israeli culture. My advice to literally anyone is anything that you do in the interim of finding your best career and your best self is valuable if you make it valuable. And if you're
Abs
if you're looking to create something valuable from it, you'll find it. And so for me, I was networking. I found clients that I worked with, and there was very little sort of shame in saying like, yes, I'm making your coffee, but I'm a marketing expert and I'm a really good copywriter.
I
And
love that so much. I can't even tell you how much I love that because I do think definitely coming from America where like, I want to say middle class Jewish people don't do those things, but here everybody's Jewish. So if you want coffee,
yes,
someone Jewish is going to
yep,
make. If you want your garbage taken out, if you want your light bulb
yep,
changed, and even a lot, all sorts of things that people don't do in America, it's totally normal here and they actually pay really well a lot of times.
correct,
And there's no
correct. And
shame
so
at
and so
all.
at the time that I was building these new skills, I was still honing my marketing skills. I was still, I still had this business that I was running. I was still working, I was still consulting, and I was still able to, in a very, very difficult 3 years, I was still able to be very present and drive all the carpools and be home with my kids. And I'm not going to say like it took a big toll on me, but able, I was able to do it, and it definitely set me up to springboard and to move from there. And I didn't say like, well, I guess I can't do anything because I'm, sort of stuck in this purgatory while I'm tasked with, raising my kids or doing this. And okay, I guess my career life is over. I was really able to sort of stay in the mix and stay up to date on all of, marketing best practices. And the clients that I worked with during that period of time, and a couple of very, very big ones, were the people I used as my references for my current job. And like, I wouldn't have had that. I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I sort of gave up on doing big things while I was, doing small things like making coffee. So, I think that it's really okay to go through transition periods, and especially in is it doesn't have to be like front and center on your resume,
Right.
but also think that it should never be something that you're ashamed of. And it should be
Absolutely.
something that you look at as a failure. And I think a lot of people get very defeated by the fact that they sometimes have to take pauses and breaks in their career. And I just think that it's okay. Like, it's fine, but like, to put something on pause, there's even in there's seasons, things
Absolutely.
die, things regrow, things come back stronger. And I think that you need to go through all of those seasons of yourself in order to really, know what your next steps are going to be. You can get sucked into the vortex of like, I'm never gonna get there. I think there's a lot of wisdom that comes with our very young age, that you realize like that there's no real finish line.
Yeah.
You're working towards something. So, okay. So to move to my next chapter, this is so cathartic.
Yeah. I'm so
Everyone
glad.
should get a chance to do this.
Well, I'm happy to
Mm.
have everyone's story. I think it's so important. Yeah, yeah. So I want to say so many things, but I'll start with I just want to say I don't know your kids, but I feel like you must be an amazing role model for your kids because they're going to be able to say, our mom did this. Like she made it through this and she did what she had to do and she did it for herself and she did it for us. And that I think is like the ultimate success story. Like it doesn't matter if you have a law degree or a doctorate or whatever, like making it in all of these changes, that's the real success if you ask me. So, first of all,
I
that's amazing.
appreciate it. I appreciate it. Listen, I think that as parents, as moms, like, it's very, very easy to, think that you're not doing enough.
Always.
Always, 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 always. And of course there's always more that you can do. But I decided a very, very long time ago that the two things that I will always be with my kids is exceptionally honest. I'm not gonna be the mom that tells my kid, like, you're the best at this if you're not the best at this. Okay? I
Yes.
will tell them that you could be the best at something. You will be good at something, but you're not going to be good at
Right.
everything. So my
Right.
kids already sort of know, and I lead with that in every area. In every area, I think that there has to be a certain amount of flexibility. I think you need a high level of self accountability, but I also think that you need to have a lot of grace, and you need to have a lot of patience with yourself. And the one thing is, even in my like approach with, I know it's completely off topic, but it's I think the message is very similar in life. Is, in Israel, I think also the religious spectrum is very
Mhm.
different than in America.
Very.
And so I
Mhm.
think it does apply also in like the career world, because I think you come with certain expectations of what your identity is, and people get stuck in those boxes. Like, I'm a lawyer, and I'm modern Orthodox, and I'm, whatever it is that you sort of get stuck doing. And I think, my approach in everything is, like, there are 613, not because you're going to do all of them, and not because you're going to do all of them well. So better than trying to be a jack of all trades and really, dabbling in many but excelling in few. Excel at the things that really speak to you and do them really well. Like, be the best in those things and try with the other things. Like, it doesn't mean that you should totally, but to stress
Right.
that you're not doing everything, I think, is where we sometimes, like, no, nobody's good at everything. You're not going to.
Correct.
And I bring this in my career also, because, I had a conversation just the other day with someone and they said, do you know how to do this? And it was a very specific skill. And I said, I know how to do it. I'm just not the best at it. And I'm smart enough to know that there's people that are much better at that. And the way that I like to work is that I like to find the people that are the best, because that's going to make the end product the best. You just won't get the best product from me, and it won't reflect really well. And I think people are sometimes afraid to say, I'm not the best at something, and that's why there's a lot of fear. So I'll tell you, speaking, because I referenced my current job, I am currently working in a 6-year-old startup in high tech. I started there. And this is also, I love Israel. I started there in the end of February. I decided that it was time for me to go back in-house somewhere. And part of that decision was driven by, first of all, that it's really hard to be a freelancer in Israel. But the other part of that decision was that I realized that I very much missed being part of a larger ecosystem and building a brand. So much of what I was project based. And so I would do the branding for a company, and I would write the content for their website, and I would create the first bunch of creatives, and I would check out their social media, and then I would pass it back to them, and that was the last I saw of it. And actually in part of what I did when I was applying for this new job, they asked me for a reference, and I used Jack Froelich, who runs Akim Israel, which is the largest provider of services for people with disabilities and special needs in Israel. And it's an amazing, amazing company. And the opportunity to work with Jack was incredible. And besides the fact that it was an easy thing for me, because it is so hard not to connect with nonprofits or companies that are just doing really amazing things. And when I called him, it kickstarted me back into their world. And he was like, you know what? He's like, I was just thinking about you while I have you on the phone. We wanted to rebrand this, and we went to this other thing because, it was a larger project, and it was coming from corporate. And he's like, I really want your opinion on it. I was like, so happy to be back working on a project. And I realized, okay, this was the right decision. I loved being in-house for those 9 years and building a brand and going through all of those changes and watching the company grow and evolve and bringing on new things. I think when you can align with a company, I was in those 9 years, I had been in the health and wellness industry. And again, it's something that I connect with. It's something that I really enjoy doing. And so I was able to do it from a really different place that felt a lot more meaningful to me. Now, I was 100% not ready. My resume was literally unfinished when I was up very late at night, as I generally am. And I saw a job posting come across, and I was like, this sounds really, really like something that I would be good at. Now, it was a position with a company called Spines, and we are an online publishing platform that really, really has changed the way that people can publish a book and access to publishing. It's an incredible company. It's an incredible concept. They were light years ahead of tech and all of the other things, as many Israeli, startups are doing things well before anyone has thought of them.
That's how it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I saw this job, and it was for a copywriter position. It was like the lead copywriter. And I had been in charge of entire marketing systems and entire branding campaigns. And so, it happens to be that copywriting is the thing that I do best, but it's not the only thing that I do. So I saw this position, and I went and I sent in my resume, and you always know. I think that people don't always trust their gut enough. My resume was not ready. Okay. It was really not ready. I had just sent it to a friend of mine literally that day. And I said, like, look it over. And he was like, okay, I have comments. Let's talk tomorrow. And tonight was when I sent it. Tomorrow never happened. And I sent it and they called me a day later. And a day later, I was sitting in their office. I sent them a writing sample and blah, blah, blah. And it just like as luck would have it. And I went to this interview and I said, listen, it's a small piece of what I do. And I think it's a little bit, for me, the salary is not exactly where, I wanted to be with my experience. And my boss said to me, my now boss at the time in the interview said to me, and I don't know where like I got the balls, but like
Necessity.
again, necessity. And also I really knew and I really trusted myself and I really knew I could do this job and I knew I could do it really better than anyone. I really believed it. And I felt zero level of imposter syndrome. And he said, yeah, listen, most people come to me after a year and we talk about salary increase and we really like to promote from within. And it was all the right things that someone would say. And he said, but do I have those, unicorns that come to me after 3 months and we're ready to, make changes? It happens. And I said, okay, great. He didn't even offer me the job yet. I said, I'll see you in 3 months. And
I love that for you.
and they called me and they were like, okay, we're sending you an offer. And this was in the last couple of weeks in February. And I said, okay, like, of course it makes sense that I would start on March 1st because there's like a week left in February. And they were like, no, 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 like you really have to start the last week in February. And I said, like, that makes no sense. It's really going to complicate things. Like I'll have like a paycheck from like, it's in Israel. It works like if you have two tlushim and like, this is going to really complicate my life. Can we just, start March 1? And they were like, no, we really can't do that. I said, is there some project that I'm unaware of that you need me for? And they said, no, March 1st is our Purim party. And it would be really weird if that was your first day because it's like the best day of the year. So you should come in at least a couple of days in advance to meet the team and like the rest of the employees because we really wouldn't want you to miss the Purim party. And I was like, that's the most amazing Israeli thing ever. I will start, and I remember I started on a Wednesday. I finished Wednesday and Thursday. And that weekend was when Iran decided to start shooting missiles. And so my first week, I was going into the office because I was like too scared. I was like, I just got this job. I really need
Yeah.
to be here. Until someone like said to me, they're like, wait a second, you have 4 kids at home. You literally don't have to be here, by law. Like just go home. So then I started working from home and I basically had like barely been onboarded, It was a really crazy way to start this new job. And I remember thinking, this is so me. Like, I think something really good just happened. And every time I'm like, something really insane has to happen. And so I'm like, I'm just so used to it already. Like it's this yin yang thing where I don't know what I would do without chaos because I think I wouldn't know what to do. I think I would just like wither and die. I don't know. And here's something that I think is also really, really important. You don't have to take the job because you're qualified for it, and you don't have to reject the job because you're overqualified for it. I really felt aligned with the company. I really felt I love reading. I love books. My mother was a reading teacher. Like I grew up in a reading house. So, for me, I was like, this is the copy will write itself, I feel really good about this. And I just said to myself, I said, okay, I'm giving myself 3 months. I'm giving myself 3 months to prove myself enough that I'm going to be able to go back and say, remember our conversation. And in my mind, it was really a 6-month goal. And I think that it's really important to create real goals for yourself.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we go into positions and we take a job and we do that job. And I think it's really limiting. I think that's also, I think, why people sometimes get stuck in their career, because you think that you're sort of scared to branch out or take on more, or like, well, that's not in my job requirements, and so like, why would I do that to myself? You know,
Because
if
that's how we grow.
because
That's
that's yeah,
that's
because
how.
that's how you grow. And so I went home during the war, and I was not the best version of myself. You talked before
Who
about
was?
no, you talked before about me being like an excellent mom. This was a low point in motherhood and like a high point in my career. I decided that this war will end and I will go back to my office, and I want to show up with so much work product and so much content and such good like I worked more hours, I think, during that war than I work like in a normal month. Like I worked double. And I remember coming back and giving, we have these like weekly creative meetings, and my boss was like, do we have anything to approve? And I was like, yes, we do. And he opened up a document and there were like 42 tabs. And he was like, what is this? And it was a turning point. It was a turning point for me. And I had scheduled the meeting to say like, hey, I'm in my brain for 3 months, and I had the expectation of acquiring a change of job title within 6 months. And at 2.5 months, my boss came to me and said, remember the conversation that we had when we hired you and you told me that you were overqualified for this position? You are. And they offered me the position that I really wanted initially. It was just a very long interview process. And I am now the creative lead for the company, and I'm working across all of the different C-level, like I'm working with everyone in the company. So not just in marketing, in the entire ecosystem of the company with all branding. So with new products and campaigns and like across the entire content infrastructure. And it's not because someone told me to do it. It's because I really wanted to. And I think, sometimes you have to really put yourself out there and know what your strengths are. Not every organization and not every boss and not every company is going to recognize it. But I also knew that if they didn't, I didn't lose anything. I,
Right.
I was really learning on the job then. I really decided that I was going to take on projects within every single part of the company, and I was going to make connections with sales reps, and I was going to I wanted to be useful to every single person in the company, because I think for any marketer and doing any type of thing marketing, if you don't, I think it's a really big mistake that people make.
Absolutely.
Even when I was working independently, I remember I used to do an intake process with my client, and then I said, okay, we'll talk in a week and I'll have a proposal for you. And people would say, like, can you tell me like sooner? I said, no, because I don't know what I can do for you or for your company until I take a week and do a deep dive into exactly what you do, exactly who you are, exactly what differentiates you from competitors in the marketplace. Like, I want to become you over the course of the
Right.
next week to tell you what I can offer you. Otherwise, I don't know. Like, I could just
Right.
make, I can give you like the grand, I'm going to do a branding kit and I'm going to do
Yeah.
this. Like, it's BS. It's real BS. And I think that that's the thing. Like, people see through you when you do those things, and again, it's not that I've been confident overly so in every time, in every area, with every customer or every client, but the times where I really was very, very confident in what I could provide as far as my skill set. It never failed me. It never, I think when you really know what you're good at and you really speak from that place, I have had clients that said to me, you're more expensive than your competition. And I said, I know, because the end product is going to be better. And you can go if cheap is what you're looking for. Like, really, I understand that actually as a, like, you have to weigh
As a
that.
human.
You have to weigh. No, and I'm sure, and I'm not like saying it in a way like there are other people. I said you could definitely find another me. You could find someone maybe a little bit cheaper, and you could find someone maybe a little bit whatever the thing is. I know for sure what I could bring to you. And so I can't tell you what the competition could bring to you. Go do your research, do your due diligence. Like, I don't ever encourage someone. And I cannot tell you, I've had clients that came back to me that said, I worked with someone else and now I want to work with you. And I've had clients that, one client in particular when I was working independently, and really I think for me, and we talk about career changes and all this other stuff, but also I think the impact that you have in whatever position you're in on the other people that you work with or that you work for, I think is just as important. Like, you might not be the boss, you might be the client, you might be the customer, I think that, coming with respect and understanding and kindness and appreciation to the people that you work with and that you work for, and I think it changes the whole dynamic of the relationship. And I had a client that I did a proposal for, and she had given me a deposit, and I had literally just, like, my divorce had just blown up. Like, it was a very complicated situation. And I knew, like, this is not a project I can take on. And I don't know when I can take it on. And I remember it was a project I really wanted to do, and it was a client that I really wanted to work with. And I called her and I said, I'll figure out how I'm going to return your deposit and all of these other things. I said, but this is not something, I'm going through something personal and blah, blah, blah. And it happened to be that she was in a field of, like, therapy and whatever. So maybe she had a little bit of a different understanding. But I remember very clearly that she said to me, she said, I need the project done, but I also need the project done by you. And I felt
That's beautiful.
right. And I felt like so valued in that moment. I think sometimes we go through our career and, like, we don't always, like, we're always waiting for that pat on the back of, like, that was an amazing campaign and, like, that
Yeah.
was a really good call. A lot of, like, the minutia and the things that you think are going to be so impactful, or the things that you say, or the projects that you create, like, okay, they're fine. Like, but they're not those, like, major explosive moments that you really latch onto in your career. This was something that it literally, like, changed my soul in the moment that it had happened. And I
That's fantastic.
said, okay, but I don't know when that's going to be. Like, I can't promise you. And she said, you call me when you're ready. And I remember,
I think
like,
she sounds like a
6
special
or 8
person. I
weeks
don't think
later,
most people are like that.
she's an incredible human being, and I'm still in touch with her. And again, I think that's part of really investing yourself into what you do, really humanizing. We talk a lot now about AI and all of this, stuff. And I use AI, and it's a big part of any tech company and any work related, anything and any office space now. And I had a conversation with someone just yesterday, and I said, there's a lot of people now, a lot of especially young people that are coming into the workforce that know AI. They were literally born into it. They know tech, they know computers, they know whatever. You know what they lack? They lack the human.
Creativity?
They lack not only the creativity, but they lack the human connection to get on a call, to get on a podcast, to speak face to face, to not send a text, to and there are certain skills that, like, we might be, a little slightly older and much, much wiser. But again, I think these are the things I think very often when we're looking for work, it can very easily become this sort of desperate, downtrodden kind of place where like I'm looking and I need and I'm hoping and I'm like selling myself from this place of weakness. Like my Hebrew's not like, we spoke before about this. Like, well, my Hebrew's really not good. You know what? My English is impeccable. I might have gaps in my career, but here's what I did during those gaps. And I might, not be the best at X, Y, and Z, but I am definitely the best at A, B, and C. And so it's really coming at it from this sort of unapologetic place of really honing in on what you're really like your truths. And sometimes those skills are really stupid. Like you don't think of them as being, so important. And those are the things that often really carry you if you can figure them out and they really differentiate you in the
Yeah,
marketplace. It's
absolutely.
making
That's
everyone tries to be the box that the job posting says instead of being themselves, which
better.
is better, which is often
Right.
like much better.
Oh my God.
It's
Well, if it doesn't work out in marketing for whatever reason, you could be a career coach because you have that rah attitude. I could talk to you about this for hours. I'm so inspired, but I want to just open back up something that you didn't say so directly, but I think is important because I've had a couple of divorced women on this show who talked about starting their own thing after a divorce. And because you need the flexibility and because it's hard to work in a place and, for a million and one other reasons. But what you talked about is kind of that lack of success in doing your own thing. Like it was good for a time and then it wasn't good. And people really these days are like, oh, just do your own thing. It's going to be great. I would like to hear a little bit, just for a minute even, about
it's a really good
taking
question.
a real job, taking a stable job after divorce and how it can be done,
Well,
because I think a lot of people don't even consider it
mhm.
because it's just too hard. But also maybe if you can touch on, I know you mentioned a couple of things in passing, but I think it's really important for people to hear about the challenges of entrepreneurship and being on your own, because it's not just I get to make my own schedule and I can make my own salary and I'm raking in the bucks. There's a lot of hardship that goes with that.
Sorry. I agree with you. And I think that, yes, the sky can be the limit. And I did well for a period of time and it was great. And I will tell you that very often when you're working for yourself, you will make half and work double. People think
Mhm.
that it's like super flexible. I never worked so many hours in my entire
Of
life.
course,
I
because you're doing the
literally
client work and the building.
correct. And also you're usually around more. And so, my kids thought that I was like super available. There's something so incredible about being like, goodbye, I'm going to work. Don't call me unless the house is burning down. And by the way, added to my Aliyah story, my apartment building did burn. So we've had a
Well,
great experience. I can't even like use
oh
a
my God.
metaphor because it's all happened to me. Okay. I don't even want to say
Wow.
things anymore because I think I like manifest them into being. But that
Wow.
being said, I think, I think that I think that if you want to work independently, I think you really really need to be prepared and also not only prepared for the time and the effort that goes into being an independent contractor. I think you also need to recognize, sorry my things. You also need to recognize that the Israeli like financial system, if we could call it that,
Yeah.
the Israeli system does not reward independent work.
Well
It's
said.
it's actually it's much much worse for you in terms of benefits, in terms of tax breaks, in terms of earning capacity, in terms of pension, in terms of savings, all of it. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and a lot of it falls on you, or you have to hire someone to, do the accounting for you. There's a lot of fear involved in that you're gonna like screw something up. And it's not like in America where like you make a mistake and the IRS, takes 500 years to catch it, and yes, maybe you'll get a bill eventually. Like they will just freeze your bank account in Israel. You won't have access to your own money. And you're like, why? And they're like,
Have you,
because you didn't sign form, whatever by this date. And now you need to
speaking
wait.
from personal experience, are
No,
you?
thank God it didn't happen to me, but I do know people that it did happen to. And
Oh, it
especially like
happened
as
to
a
me.
whim, like you just, I don't know, the real mail
Oh,
and the junk mail here look the same. And there's
yes.
I mean, until I understood that there was like a Gov app that I had all my information on it, it was a long time. Okay. And so, there's a real learning curve, as I think people are sometimes scared of stepping into the, Israeli workforce, that like you're not going to be sort of valued or accepted or successful. Maybe your Hebrew's not so good, or maybe you don't have those kinds of connections to break in, or you don't think that your degree. And again, like it ends up being like that most of what your fears are like actually are so not present. And so I think that idea didn't occur to me. I was very much guilty of that. Like I think I went independent. Now, obviously, also it allowed me that flexibility to sort of be, you mentioned also like being, with my kids and this, that. Yeah. I also think that at a certain point, I'm thinking of a very not nice way of saying it, but the expression of you better bleep or get off the pot kind of comes to mind. That like I had in my brain that January was like, that was my cutoff. That's I ended up starting to work at the end of February. But to me, it was like, okay, I have to start a serious like job search starting in January, because I had left the first half of the school year to like acclimate my kids. My son had just started boarding school. My older daughter was a senior in high school. My other daughter was now in middle school. My son was in sixth grade. I was just there, but I didn't want to set myself up for failure and say, okay, I'm going to start like September 1. Okay. So I started, and I did what I had to do. And then, obviously like war, and then we went right into like Pesach, and we went to, so it's never a good time, but I do think that you need to be
Exactly.
very honest with yourself and say, like, I need a cutoff point. I need to set realistic goals for myself. And even more than that, like, I think realistic and aggressive at the same time, because it's okay. Push yourself a little bit, So I thought I was being super aggressive by saying, within 3 months, I'm gonna start the conversation towards, I'm gonna start, showing my, opening my mouth and saying, I did this and I worked on this, and hopefully at 6 months it will come to fruition. And instead, like, because I had that in my brain, and I was already operating on that timeline, it happened much faster. And it happened, and again, I want to say, I was really happy about it, but I wasn't entirely surprised by it. And I think that's like a really, I think as women, we like shy away from setting aggressive goals, or from really having like a tremendous amount of confidence. I'm generalizing, but I see it come up. Like, we're in a lot of Facebook groups, and so we see a lot of the same posts from women and talking about their careers. And I'm sure that you see this a lot in your line of work. I think women tend to, unfortunately, because of the amount of things that we hold in our day-to-day lives, in the best of times, we often like operate from a place of apology instead of a place of authority. And like, I'm so sorry that I have kids that I need to pick up from school, and I'm going to be a little bit late, and but I'm going to make up for it. And other that, like, and I think there's a certain amount of like authority in, I have raised 4 kids on my own, and I've managed, and I've done really hard things. And so like the project that I'm working on, it's like done in my mind. Like
Yeah.
it's so done. You know, that idea of you want something done, give it to a busy person. Like if anybody knows how to prioritize, and if anybody knows, don't apologize for those things. Like if you're really good at what you do, like, you know, and I was very honest about that when I spoke to my boss about this change in title. And you know, I said, you know, the one thing that I really want to be honest about is this is who I am, and there's going to be days and there's going to be periods where, you know, I might have to do something in the morning, and I'm not gonna be there at 9. I'm gonna be there at 10 or 10:30. And there's gonna be times where I'm leaving a little bit. My work will always be done, and if it's not gonna be done, you'll know about it. But I don't you will never I was very honest. I said you will never get the best of me if I'm feeling that I'm always working from a place of stress and pressure and trying to prove my value with FaceTime instead of proving my value with my value.
Yeah.
And it was, and again, this comes, you know, with working somewhere where people prioritize family and people prioritize wellness and mental health and life. And actually, my my boss called someone else into the office, and he said, you know, here, talk to, and it was someone else in my office, and he was talking about how he has young children, and it's really hard for him to like be away all the time, and he feels that it's very important that he help his wife and that he steps up and he's present for his kids. And he was like, you will never ever hear from me as long as like there's communication, and as long, and I think it's because I brought it up from a place of reality instead of, you know, apology. And not every place is going to be like that.
No, but I do wanna maybe even just end here, because I don't wanna take up your whole night, but I think what you said is a valid and important point. I think for sure in my 20 years of working in Israel and of working with a lot of different companies and helping clients in a lot of different companies and seeing friends in different companies, I think that the family value here and the importance of family and parenthood is really present, and a lot of people that I come across are afraid to say they want to be home for dinner, but in real life people don't care. Most
Right.
hiring managers and bosses are very, very flexible, and nobody should be afraid to chase their dreams because they have a family, whether
Correct.
they're married or divorced.
And you know what? If that's the reason that you don't get that job or that position, that was not meant for
You
you.
would
You would never
exactly,
be
you wouldn't
happy
want to
there.
work there
Right,
anyway.
they did you a favor. They did you a favor. And again, you know, and I could talk to you all night because I really think that what you do is so so important. Like
Oh,
I
thanks.
learned it, you know, sort of the hard way, and I got there, and I really feel so blessed that I am doing what I love, and it's been incredible for me. But I think that not everyone gets, and also even when you do get there, sometimes you had to go through really tough times to get there, and
Yes.
I wish that I had, you know, that insight, you know, through someone who really understood to help me with that. So I think it's so, so important. So first of all, like, kol kavod for what you do. I think it's
Thank
fabulous.
you.
And yeah, like the last thing that I was gonna say is that, you know, the Israeli system is sort of flexible enough already that, you know, there are people that I meet, you know, I met someone yesterday in my office, and I was like, who are you? And he was like, "I work here." And I was like, when did you start? And he said, no, I've been working here for like a year. And I was like, who are you? And he said, no, I was in Miluim. And I was like, oh, okay. So you just weren't here for, you know, and
A
again,
year.
you adapt, and it's so much more flexible, and it's so much more forgiving and accepting and casual, that I think Americans, if I can give any insight, especially to newer olim, it's that the entire economy here is built on flexibility
And
and
family.
flexibility and family, and everyone's interests are very much aligned. You don't have to, there's such a blessing in that the national holidays are, the chagim that we would normally have to like explain away, like, no, I know we just had a holiday, but this is like the next holiday of the holiday, and then there's all the
Right?
and you don't like, so that's really off the table. It's everything else now, just like live your life and show up authentically, and really you take the risks, because you will see that there's so much more out there for you than you really thought, than you even realized, and sometimes that comes with maturity, and sometimes that comes with really good advice. So,
Oh,
you know
thank you. Thank you so much. This was just such a fantastic conversation. You were so inspiring and enlightening as well. So
thank
thank you for taking the
you.
time.